Welcome to the Capital News. I'm your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast, There's No Inflation, but There Is. Today, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released the Consumer Price Index summary. We will get to that. I will read that report, not in its entirety, but we'll go through the biggest pieces of information. But needless to say, the headline number was at 4.2%. Well above market expectations. And of course, the excuse is, well, it's those damn base effects that were in place because of COVID-19, the restrictions. We had such low numbers last year, so expect to see something like this. Although, again, it was worse than anticipated. The Federal Reserve, of course, is stating that this is all transitory. This is all just due to those base effects, that their quote-unquote stimulus, their monetary policy, is going to remain in place for some time. So they were attempting to do damage control because equity markets sold off around the globe. There was a continuation of that movement yesterday, really the past couple of days. This is not transitory. It just simply is not. That's what they want to tell you. They wanted to tell us over a decade ago that the subprime crisis was contained to subprime. Just to subprime. That it wasn't going to go out through the entire real estate market. Oh, but it did. And it went beyond that. It was systemic. It was global. So you're going to have to excuse me for not trusting these people at the Federal Reserve, because they also told us that quantitative easing, which is an inflationary policy by definition, was going to be temporary as well. As I like to say, quantitative easing is a couple years away from applying for a driver's license. Okay, so it is not temporary. Subprime was not contained. Inflation is not going to be transitory. This is not where the Federal Reserve finally gets it right. This is going to be one of the biggest clusters they have ever conjured up in history. Not just them, but all of these central banks. Because they know the game is over. The jig is up. But they don't want to cop up to it. They don't want to say, we're responsible for this mess up. We're responsible for this massive gap in wealth inequality. They don't want to say that. They don't want to say that they're responsible for allowing politicians to run amok for decades, to run up a $28.5 trillion national debt, to finance multi-trillion dollar annual deficits over the past couple of years, and we're probably going to have one next year as well, because we're far from out of the woods. This is the only game in town. This is the only thing they know how to do is inflate. Inflate and inflate. But they'll tell you that it doesn't exist. The nerve, the audacity of these people to hit you over the head with a frying pan and say it wasn't them. To break your legs and then say, oh, well, here's a pair of crutches, and if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be able to walk. This is who these people are. This is what they're doing. They do it right out in the open. But people just don't want to pay attention, or they've been bought off by Uncle Sam, financed by the Federal Reserve, with your sit down and shut up checks, which we're going to get to in this report. Because as I've been stating here for over a year, before the passage of the Nobody Cares Act 1.0, that free was never so expensive. People are going to believe that these checks from Uncle Sam and all of these stimulus packages, etc., are going to be free. It's a gift. It's manna from heaven. And it's because the Republicans love me, or it's because the Democrats love me. No, they don't. No, they don't. And I have all the evidence on my side. You got a bribe. That's all it was. And the powers that be understand this. Because look around the world where they don't have the ability to do what we've gotten away with for the time being. Now, we're going to have to pay the piper, obviously, but it bought us some time. You can't pull this game in some of these poorer countries because they just don't have the quote-unquote monetary or fiscal ammunition to pull it off. So those people are already in the streets rioting and protesting and demanding major changes. And major structural change is needed on a global scale. That's why we have not seen anything yet. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So we're going to get to that report. Market sold off. We'll get to market performance. Elon Musk is making some waves once again this evening after markets closed. The CEO of Tesla now coming out and saying that he is suspending Bitcoin payments to purchase a Tesla vehicle. You know, it's laughable. It really is. I want this guy investigated. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if you and me did any of this stuff, a fraction of what this guy tweets and puts out there in statements, we would be investigated. They'd lock us up and throw away the key. They put Martha Stewart behind bars. Martha Stewart. Do you remember that? They made an example out of that woman, of all people, to make an example out of. They chose Martha Stewart, however many years ago that was. So when it comes to the crypto space, even when it comes to Tesla itself, and I think the accounting gimmickry that's going on there, I think this guy's in a lot of trouble. They're talking about Dogecoin and all this manipulation and that. And then, of course, before he went on SNL, again, Elon Musk, Saturday Night Live, tweeting out, you know, it would be speculation if you got involved in cryptocurrency. Well, that's not what he said before. That's not what he was saying a handful of months ago when he decided to put Bitcoin on Tesla's books. And actually, I believe they made more money off of that speculation in Bitcoin than they have selling cars for the past decade. That's how laughable all this is. Of course, you have to take into consideration, I'm taking into consideration all of those tax credits that they receive in order to sell these vehicles. You strip those out, yeah, he made more money on Bitcoin than he has selling cars for the past decade. That's how laughable this economy is. That's how laughable these markets are. It's a casino, as I stated yesterday. It is a complete joke. And it is a major disservice to the investing public. And I don't even know if we can use that word, the investing public. It's just all a casino. And I think that is very, very dangerous, and I think it's going to take a good while to unwind. But one day I do believe that it will. So he is suspending Bitcoin for payments of his vehicles. And as would be expected, there was a massive drop-off in Bitcoin, down 15%. It rebounded a little bit. It is now at $51,200 a coin. It was below $50,000 not too long ago. Okay, so that's something to pay attention to. Again, folks, as I criticize the Federal Reserve and a handful of individuals because of the power that they have, that they can come out as individuals and move markets, what does that tell you? We don't have a marketplace. We have a very centralized marketplace. When the chair of the Federal Reserve can come out and make a comment and move markets, when the Treasury Secretary can come out and make comments and move markets, when any central bank president can come out and make comments, or a CEO like Elon Musk can come out and move the crypto markets, what does that tell you? Is that somewhere you want to be? Do you feel all warm and cozy inside? Because are you confident that everybody's just going to sit on their hands, keep their mouth shut, not come out and manipulate these markets anymore? You can get wiped out in a matter of seconds because somebody who has some popularity, who has some clout, who has some pull, who has some influence, can tweet or put out a memo, and bam, markets crash or markets catapult to the moon. I hope you understand what I'm saying here, and I hope you respect and understand how dangerous this is. This is not an environment in which somebody can really, truly invest. And that's a disservice, because that's what markets are here for. They're here to serve everybody. So shame on Mr. Musk as far as I'm concerned. Market performance, we have the dollar index overnight slightly down at 90.65. It did gain during the day's session, even on the back of a worse than expected inflation report, pretty much off the back of the expectation that the Federal Reserve might actually start to taper or maybe even perhaps increase interest rates. Of course, that's a joke. Everybody and their mother knows it, but presumably the markets didn't understand that, at least not from a knee-jerk reaction. So we'll see what happens over the rest of the week and into next week as the markets further digest this information. But that has been the trend. Let's see, not too much movement overnight in the currency markets. Most of that happened during the day session. Overnight futures trading, we have the Dow down 0.2%. The S&P 500 is flat. The NASDAQ 100 is in the green, up about 0.33%. Japanese cash trade, again, down in the red, giving back 2.2%. A sea of red across the pond in Europe. And it looks like their futures market, early futures trading market, is also down big in the red. Australian cash trade giving back 0.9% in Chinese stocks, and Indian stocks also down 1%. Let's see, just a quick look at some of the big flyers. Apple gave back 2.5%. Tesla gave back 4.4%. Microsoft down almost 3%. Amazon down 2.25%. And Facebook down 1.33%. So those were the high flyers. Nobody was safe today. WTI is down overnight. We have WTI at $65.10 a barrel. Brent at $68.31. Natural gas, $2.97. Gasoline, $2.12. We have the average gas price, I believe, over $3 a gallon now. We haven't seen that, I think, since about 2014. So that's great, right? But there's no inflation. Oh, wait, there is. Gold and silver got hit during the day session, again, on the anticipation that that meant that the Federal Reserve was going to start tapering. What a joke. But both precious metals are up overnight. Gold at $1,821 an ounce. Silver hanging on to the 27 handle at $27.07 an ounce. Copper, $4.76 a pound. Lumber hanging on at $1,610 per 1,000 linear board feet. And a big spike to Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note, now yielding 1.67%. 1.67%. So it broke out of that consolidation where we've been for about the past month. Again, 1.67%. So the argument from the Federal Reserve has been, once we see these yields increasing on Uncle Sam's junk, we say, well, you know what? That's a good sign. That's a good sign, according to the Federal Reserve. That's indicative of growth. Well, if the knee-jerk reaction from the bond market was to sell these treasuries, thus getting an increase in yields, off the back of this inflation report, which was worse than expected, well, is that a good thing then? Because if higher yields are indicative of growth, do we want higher inflation? If we got a print next month of another 4.2% or 5%, is that going to be even better? So which is it? Are yields increasing because of inflation concerns or because of miraculous growth? Which one is it? Now, we know some other central banks were quite concerned when they saw their yields spike, such as the Reserve Bank of Australia. You remember that a couple months ago? They panicked. They didn't think that that was growth-related. They said that that was inflation-related. And they came in with several $billion to get those yields back down. Again, they're fighting inflation with inflation because inflation, by definition, is an increase in the money supply. Period. End of story. The effects of inflation, higher prices, occur throughout the economy at different times for different durations of varying degrees. You can sometimes pinpoint where some of that inflationary pressure is going to go because policymakers are trying to have it go there, such as quantitative easing. We know the goal of quantitative easing was in attempts to create a wealth effect, meaning those with financial assets were going to be the beneficiaries. But that's okay, folks, because as soon as they made all of their profits, they would start spending that money and it would start trickling down to everybody else. Well, the only problem is that doesn't work. Okay, trickle-down economics is junk economics. It does not work. You might get some things on the margin, but that's not enough, especially in a country of 330 million people. not good enough, doesn't work, and it's leading to all of these problems that we see because, again, QE was not, is not transitory. It is here to stay. We are still fighting the great financial crisis. We still have the Federal Reserve purchasing $40 billion per month in mortgage-backed securities, despite the fact that housing prices are through the roof. And we're not even the worst country when it comes to housing price increases. I mean, you look at Canada, my goodness. And this is a lot of, again, investors, pension funds, hedge funds, private equity, what have you, all cash offers, crowding individuals, young couples, young families out of the market. Basically a generation out of the market from beginning to accumulate and build wealth, long-term wealth that they can pass on. They're priced out. And you got a lot of foreigners and a lot of countries that are breaking down, trying to get their capital into other countries that they deem safer. So they're leaving, capital is leaving Ukraine, Russia, China, and it's going to Australia, it's going to New Zealand, it's going to the UK, it's going to Canada, it's going to the US. And that's why you see these outrageous increases. Plus, thanks to everything that all of these central banks and federal governments are doing as well, only adds gasoline to this fire. All right, so again, those are some basic questions to ask the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, the chair of the Fed. 10-year yields are up. Inflation's up. So is that because of the growth, inflation? What is it? Basic questions. I would like to see him dance around it. He wouldn't have an answer for it. That's what he would do. What else do I want to mention here before we get to that report? Oh, yes. The conflict between Israel and the Palestinians continues, unfortunately, although the U.S. is sending an envoy in hopes to broker a ceasefire, and hopefully that happens. These people have been fighting each other for thousands of years, well before even the establishment of these religions. But nonetheless, we want to see peace. We want to see prosperity for the Israelis, for the Palestinian people. We have to stop with this stuff. I mean, it's the 21st century. We got to get our act together, but unfortunately, that is not the case. So we'll continue to provide some updates as we see fit here. Then the Colonial Pipeline situation seems to be back on track. However, we now have to concern ourselves with the lunacy and the ridiculousness out of Michigan, where we have Governor Whitmer, this lunatic. I mean, all you have to do is look in this woman's eyes, but don't do it for too long because I'm not sure if it's contagious and if you'll end up nuts like her. But she wants to shut down a pipeline in Michigan, which, only supplies the Midwest and some parts of Canada. So we're just making our way east to the Midwest. I guess to the West will be next. So this is an article out of PBS. So we got company defies Michigan governor's order to close pipeline. An upper Midwestern oil pipeline continued operating on Wednesday despite a shutdown demand from Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer that the operator warned could lead to fuel disruptions similar to those resulting from a cyber attack on an East Coast system. Whitmer ordered Line 5, that's what it's called, Line 5, closed last November because of the potential for a spill in a channel linking two of the Great Lakes. As her May 12th deadline arrived, Canadian pipeline company Enbridge said only the federal government has the authority over its operations. Enbridge, backed by numerous chambers of commerce and Republican legislators in Michigan, seized on last week's hack of the Colonial Pipeline, which delivers about 45% of the gasoline consumed on the East Coast. The resulting shutdown led to panic buying that has left thousands of filling stations without fuel and motorists in long lines. Quote, the cyber attack that triggered an unplanned temporary closure brings to the forefront what consumers could face, end quote, according to Mike Mueller, Enbridge's director of operations for the Great Lakes region. Continuing, he says, without Line 5, consumers will shoulder the burden of supply disruptions and related price increases, particularly for propane and transportation fuel. Whitmer's office said in a statement that the Colonial Pipeline interruption, quote, shows the danger of relying heavily on a single energy supply That's why Governor Whitmer has put in place a plan to protect jobs, diversify, and expand our renewable energy sources, and ensure Michigan's energy needs are met, while also taking action to get the oil out of the water as soon as possible, end quote. That is one of the dumbest things I have ever heard in my life. But they pat themselves on the back with such a statement. They don't want to rely on one single source of energy. Okay, well then have the pipeline, have your fancy wind turbines, have your fancy solar panels. Diversify. These people are beyond ridiculous. Oh my goodness. Line 5 moves oil and natural gas liquids for 645 miles through northern Wisconsin and Michigan to Sarnia, Ontario. The nearly 23 million gallons it carries daily are refined for gasoline, jet fuel, and propane in several Midwestern states, as well as Ontario and Quebec. A roughly 4-mile segment divides into 2 pipes that cross the Straits of Mackinac, which connects Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. The state, in 1953, granted an easement to place the pipes on the strait's bottom. Whitmer revoked it, saying Enbridge hadn't met its safety provisions, which the company disputes. So that's still up in the air. It is in court. A federal judge is hearing the case. He may send it down to a Michigan state judge. That remains to be seen. But this is something, folks. This is something. These are supply chain disruptions. I mean, they're breaking us down. I mean, this is almost as if it's on purpose, that this is some sort of coordinated attack on the United States of America, perhaps by Americans ourselves, by our elected officials. I mean, this is a joke. I mean, we saw what happened in the winter with Texas. We just saw what happened with Colonial Pipeline, We're now maybe going to experience Line 5 closure. Can anybody make any sense of this? This is what these people come up with. This is what the Democrats want to do. This is what Obama said over a decade ago when he was running for president with his energy policy. Your energy prices are going to go up. They are necessarily going to go up. I can't remember the quote, but that was something along those lines. You remember that? Because we can't be diversified. We can't strive for any type of energy independence. And that's an extremely hard thing, to be 100% energy independent. But at least to get closer to that goal is something that should be done. And to look at all streams of energy, nuclear, even coal, because it's very abundant in this country, and it works. And it works. I mean, they're building like 6 coal fire plants, six coal power plants over in China on a daily basis, just about. They don't care. They got 1.3 billion people. They put everybody else to shame. Many nations combined. Nobody stops them. It's all a joke at the end of the day. That's all it really is. But let's move on with the Consumer Price Index for April. The Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, the CPIU, increased by 0.8% in April on a seasonally adjusted basis after rising 0.6% in March, according to the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Over the last 12 months, the All Items Index increased by 4.2% before a seasonal adjustment. This is the largest 12-month increase since a 4.9% increase for the period ending September of 2008. The index for used cars and trucks rose 10% in April. You heard me correctly, 10%. This was the largest one-month increase since the series began in 1953. Oh, but there's no inflation, folks. Don't worry about it. And it accounted for over one-third of the seasonally adjusted all items increase. The food index increased in April, rising 0.4% as the indexes for food at home and food away from home both increased. The energy index decreased slightly as a decline in the index for gasoline in April more than offset increases in the indexes for electricity and natural gas. The index for all items less food and energy rose 0.9% in April, its largest monthly increase since April of 1982. Nearly all major component indexes increased in April, along with the index for used cars and trucks. The indexes for shelter, airline fares, recreation, motor vehicle insurance, and household furnishing and operations were among the indexes with a large impact on the overall increase. Oh, you mean the things that people need to live? Ah, yes, transportation, shelter, insurance, and household operation expenses. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But it's just transitory. It's no big deal. The all items index rose 4.2% for the 12 months ending in April, a larger increase than the 2.6% increase for the period ending in March. Similarly, the index for all items less food and energy rose 3% over the last 12 months, a larger increase than the 1.6% rise over the 12-month period ending in March. The energy index rose by 25.1% over the last 12 months, and the food index increased by 2.4%. So those are some of your big movers. Now, another article I want to get into to round out the podcast has to deal with car prices because they are going through the roof. Now, this article is a few months old, but it is still highly relevant because it's still talking about fourth quarter prices, fourth quarter of 2020 with respect to new cars and used cars. And with some markets, especially with rentals, you're talking several $100s a day to rent a vehicle. You have a lot of rental car companies purchasing a lot of the used car inventory that still exists on the market, and they're just going bananas over this stuff. And all of this price increase that you are witnessing, and one thing after the next, is just a result of the out-of-control fiscal and monetary policies that we have been living through for the past year and continue to do so. So all of that quote-unquote free money that Uncle Sam gave you because he loves you so dearly and thinks about you all the time, it's gone. Poof, it's gone. As soon as it comes in, it goes out. It finds a new home, doesn't it? Fantastic. And people can't figure it out. And by the time they do, it's going to be too late, and there's not going to be much of anything that we can do. That's why it's called It's Too Late. So here's the article. Average new car prices cross the $40,000 threshold in 2020, and that's nuts. The latest analysis shows new car buyers not only paid more, but coughed up larger down payments to make a purchase happen. So not only are these people using their stimulus checks, they're also taking the stimulus checks of their children as well, I would imagine. Last year was, well, something. Amid everything that happened in 2020, car buyers in the auto industry also created a new record, though it's not really one to celebrate. The average new car price paid in December of 2020 in the fourth quarter of last year crossed $40,000 for the first time. $40,000! Edmunds released its quarterly analysis of car buying trends last week that showed the average amount borrowed for a new car in the fourth quarter was $35,373, and buyers brought an average down payment of $4,734 to the table. Combine them, and you get an average new car price of $40,107. On average, new car buyers left dealerships or signed papers from home, having agreed to a car payment of $581 per month. $581 per month at a 4.6 APR over 70 months. It's like buying a house. I mean, before you know, we already do. I think there are car loans that go out for 8 years. I mean, this is ridiculous. It is absolutely insane. And just wait until all of these electric vehicles, come to the market by government decree. Because we've already heard from several countries around the world, they want to basically ban any type of combustion engine by 2030. It's only a handful of years away, folks. And when you talk about all of the extra commodities that are going to have to be mined to go into these vehicles, prices are going to be through the roof. But it's going to be so green and environmentally friendly. Although new car prices trended in this direction for a while, Edmunds said in December it is a likely little bit of an outlier when it comes to pushing the figures this high. The final month of the year is historically a big month for luxury car brands moving old model years to make room for new cars. The more luxury cars moved, the more weight they add to average figures. Makes sense. So we may see some reprieve from a $40,000 average price in early 2021, but the long-term shift to SUVs and pickup trucks doesn't help. Oh, and SUVs and pickup trucks, those are the greenest vehicles on the road, don't you know it? Edmunds noted the trend is alive and well, and new car buyers are increasingly looking for more features and equipment. Isn't that interesting? That leaves a whole host of buyers out of the market, just like housing, or pushes them into the increasingly popular used car market. There's a ready supply of off-lease vehicles with a host of modern equipment returned to dealers, ripe for far better deals. The average price of a used vehicle in the last quarter of 2020 rang in at $27,689, which includes an average down payment of $3,283. So if you were just to say now the average used car, again, roughly at $28,000, if you were to say, all right, that's going up another 10%, which we just saw, that's another $2,800 on top of it. We're at $30,000 for used cars if these trends continue. That extra $2,800, that's your stimulus check. A couple of your stimulus checks. Right there, gone. But people can't figure it out. They don't understand what was going to happen. I've been screaming from the rooftops for over a year. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do not pass the Nobody Cares Act. Don't even think about doing that. Don't do it. But nobody wants to listen. 96-0, no votes for America. Republicans couldn't care less. Democrats obviously couldn't care less. Spend money we don't have. Do what you got to do. And we did. And we continue to do it. And with this last round of stimulus, fiscal policy, and monetary policy, basically Nobody Cares Act 3.0, nobody wants to go to work. This is really decimating small businesses once again. Those that were able to survive the storm and are now attempting to reopen can't find employees because they can't compete with the government. Surprise, surprise. Small businesses don't have a printing press. The government does. People don't want to go back to work. They're not being enticed to go back to work despite sign-on bonuses, things just to interview, little cash just to interview. They are crippling the economy. They are crippling small businesses. It's a continuation. That's what this is. And I'm not going to be surprised if something should happen within the markets, within the economy, or both, that leads to some other extension of moratoriums, forbearance, maybe even some other type of stimulus check. Now, it might be more targeted, but nonetheless, there might be something else coming down the pike. I don't know what country I'm in. I really don't. We are a first world banana republic. To me, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think it's perfectly evident to anybody who's paying attention. We've done this to ourselves. Politicians don't care about the people. They care about maintaining their power. And we, the people, allow this to go on because we get into our silos. You pick a side. You pick a team. And if it's Team Red, they can do no wrong. And if it's Team Blue can do no wrong. But guess what? They're both doing wrong. A whole bunch of wrong. And we're the ones that have to pay for it. So we're responsible for this too, because this is our government. We do elect these people, but we don't hold them accountable. And we continue to fall for the same tricks, the same language, the same smoke screens, the same apologies, the same BS. Year in and year out. Oh, it's the other side. Just give me another chance. Oh, it's the other side. Just give me another chance. When are you going to wake up? When are you going to snap out of it? We've been down this path for too long. At this juncture, I don't think it's reversible. So it's basically on track to hit rock bottom and then hope and pray that we gain some sense and can rebuild from there by adopting once again our Constitution and free market capitalism. That's a big ask. It's a hope and a prayer, but I'll take it. There's no inflation, folks, but there is. Pay attention. It is not transitory. Prices are going up across the board. It is here to stay. This is structural. You cannot do what we have done and just say, oh, we're just going to turn the corner with no problems just after a little over a year. Doesn't work like that. Buckle up. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.